Hello and welcome to my guide on how to pass the PNPT in 2025. Now, I personally just took the PNPT about a month ago, and I want to make a video reflecting on my experience, how I did, and what you can look out for, and certain tips, strategies, and tricks that you can use on the exam to pass yourself. Now, spoiler alert, I did not pass on the first attempt. It took me 2 attempts to pass the PNPT, and I want to make sure that all of you pass on the first attempt. So here's what I did to study and some tips and tricks to look out for. This video is going to consist of 3 main parts. First, I'm going to talk about the prep. What did I do to study? How did I study? How long did I study for? And some try hack me and hack the boxes to complete on your own to practice and sharpen your skills. Second is going to be talking about the exam itself. So this is going to be how the exam is formatted, what was I thinking going through it, what did the exam look like, and things like that. Now, obviously, I cannot disclose the details of the exam. This is strongly against TCM's policy, and it's not something that I would do. The exam is going to be kept a secret, and I will not disclose any details, but I'll talk in general terms and vague strategies just to help you along and get the idea of what the exam will look like. And lastly, I'm going to talk about after the exam. So after the examination portion, what does your report look like? How should you format it? What template should you use? How long should your report be? All these questions will be answered in that section. So without further ado, hopefully you take something away from this video and enjoy how you can pass your 2025 PNPT. Number 1, prep. How did I prepare to take the PNPT? And I can break it down into 4 main questions. First, what courses did I use to study? Well, obviously I used the TCM provided courses, so that being in order from, in my opinion, the most important to the least important. I did the Practical Ethical Hacker first. So that's that big, super long course that Heath Adams does, and it is fantastic. That course teaches the foundation and the baseline to everything you need to know about Active Directory, attacking it, remediating it, and everything in between. So that is the number 1 course that you need to take if you want to pass the PNPT. Second on that list is the external pen test checklist. Again, another course by Heath Adams, and spoiler alert, all of these courses are going to be from Heath. This course is exactly what it sounds like. It's a checklist for an external penetration test. The PNPT is a simulated external penetration test. Obviously, these two go hand in hand, and this course teaches you about a checklist that TCM uses, some strategies, some mindsets, most importantly, trying to get you to shift from a CTF mindset to an actual pen test mindset. What are you looking for? What should you report? How do you remediate certain things? And recommendations to the client based on what you find. So that is my number 2 recommendation. Number 3, we have the OSINT course. A big part of this exam being external is you have to perform open source intelligence on the target and find information to push you through into the internal network. So I didn't use this course as much as I thought I would on the exam, but it's still incredibly important. The strategies it teaches and how you should approach an external pen test with OSINT in mind. It also just teaches generally good strategies for OSINT. If you ever need to perform OSINT in the future, this course gives you a great foundation for doing that. And lastly on my list, from all of the courses provided with a purchase of the PNPT, I have the privilege escalation courses. So that being the Windows and the Linux Prevest courses. I have these at the bottom simply because I felt like the techniques that taught wasn't really that relevant to the exam itself. And even Heath, and I'll pop up an image on screen, but Heath and the TCM team is kind of just, they're not using this course anymore. They're gonna update it very, very soon. So it's sort of outdated in that sense, and it's still very important. And the techniques that they teach are good to know, but I didn't use it that much on the PNPT, and I don't think it is if you really want to cut a course off and you really don't want to take it, obviously I recommend taking all 5 of these courses. But if you really don't want to take a course, that's the one I'd cut, the Windows and the Linux ProDesk. Next, let's talk about CTFs and labs and boxes. So to prepare, I also did Hack the Box and Try Hack Me. Specifically, I did the Hack the Box Active Directory exploitation path, or they call them tracks. So I did the 80 track from Hack the Box, and this does require a subscription. It requires a VIP subscription to Hack the Box, which I think is $13 a month. And what I'd recommend is doing all of the courses first. And I'm also going to talk about checklists later on in this prep section, but do all the courses, do all the checklists, and then about a month before your exam, I would buy either a Try Hack Me or a Hack the Box premium subscription and then use it to its fullest. So on this track, there are probably 10 or 15, if not more, machines that are all deal with Active Directory. So enumerating it, exploiting it, laterally moving or vertically moving, etc. And Hack the Box is sort of the cream of the crop of this kind of stuff. So if you want practical experience and practicing your skills that you learned outside of the Marvel.local lab that Heath provides, I strongly recommend going into Hack the Box or Try Hack Me. I have some Try Hack Me rooms that I'll recommend too, and doing this path. So again, it requires premium. It is not free, but for $13, I think it is incredibly valuable. Going and shifting over to Try Hack Me, there are 2 main boxes that I recommend. So the first one is going to be Attactive Directory, and this one is a free box. It's a free machine, and it is really good considering it's a free machine. A lot of the Try Hack Me machines that are high level are sort of gate kept behind their VIP paywall, which makes sense. But with Attactive Directory, I found that it is a really good box for getting your feet wet in AD. Attactive Directory was the first AD box I ever did, and I think it was a great introduction, got my feet wet, gave me a solid foundation, and I took really good notes, and I still use those notes to this day. So highly recommend Attactive Directory from TryHackMe. And if you do decide to buy TryHackMe Premium or VIP, whatever they call it, I'd recommend doing the Hollow and the Wreath network machines because these two are networks and they emulate sort of what you're going to see on the exam. So you're going to have multiple machines, you're going to have a domain controller that are connected to these machines, and you're going to have to pivot from one machine to the next, and then eventually up to the domain controller. So using that experience that you're going to gain from the Hollow network or the Wreath network, I think Hollow is easier, so I'd just recommend starting with Hollow and then going to Wreath if you still want the practice. The third thing I recommend for preparation for the PNPT is to use checklists. The biggest thing from point number 1, which was learning from the courses, is to take thorough notes. Write down everything you think is important, which, spoiler alert, is a lot of the course. All of it is important. You should take notes on all of it and take good notes at that. After you've done all the courses, I recommend to make a checklist. And this checklist is going to be sort of the culmination of your notes. You're going to squish all of your notes down, down, down until it's just a command or an execution path or anything that could be of use when you're actually in the exam. So you don't want to have to always go back to your notes and have to scrape through the examples and find that specific command you use. You should pluck it out of your notes, put it into a separate document that says, hey, this command is for this purpose. Use it here. And then you could do an example of you using that command and the syntax. That's what my checklist looks like. And maybe I'll pop up a screenshot on the screen of what that looks like, but highly recommend to use checklists. And if you make a checklist, I recommend going through every single command and every single thing on that checklist. And it may not be the most efficient method, but realize you have 5 whole days on this exam. and you are simulating a penetration test. You want to give the most value to your client. You want to find the most things as possible. And if your checklist has a bunch of different possible findings and possible execution paths, if you go through all of them, then you check off, literally check off everything that the client could possibly want. Another thing I want to mention is a mind map that I found, and I'm not exactly sure who made it. I'm going to provide a image on the screen and a link in the description, but this mind map is incredibly detailed and incredibly just fun to explore and look at. I recommend checking it out, and it's on GitHub, so go check it out, go explore it, and if you've taken the PEH course, you'll know and you'll recognize some of the commands actually on there. You'll recognize the commands, you'll recognize what they do, and sort of the pathing and the mindset that you need to get into for a successful penetration test. The last thing I want to go over for preparation is how long did I personally study for the PNPT? And I studied for about 2 months on and off. And I want to say that the coursework alone took me about 2 or 3 weeks, and then the rest of that time was spent just practicing, doing the labs, redoing the labs, doing try hack me, doing hack the box, etc. And it's also good to note that I took the PJPT 2 or 3 months ago, so I have already completed the PEH course. So for the PJPT, the only course you need is the Practical Ethical Hacker course. And since I've already completed that course, it skipped a major chunk of that study time. So the other 4 courses, being the OSINT course, the external checklist, and the 2 Privesks, those 4 courses took me about 2 or 3 weeks uh, to maybe a month on off. And then the last month, as I recommended before, was just spent. I bought a try hack. I think I bought a Hack the Box subscription, and I went through the Active Directory checklist, made my own personal checklist, and practiced using that checklist for boxes, and took really good notes. And that is how I went into the exam. Now let's talk about the exam itself. How's it formatted? What does it look like? How did I feel during the exam? What did I do during the exam? Etc., etc. So, straight from the PNPT website, I'm going to be reading off what the exam details are. So, you have 5 days of exam time, 2 days of report time, and at the end of your report time, you have to give a live debrief presentation to the client regarding the findings that you found. And I'm also going to read the description of how you can pass the PNPT exam. What is required of you as the student to pass? In order to receive the certification, a student must 1. Perform open source intelligence, or OSINT, to gather intel on how to properly attack the network. 2. Leverage their Active Directory exploitation skills to perform AV and egress bypassing, lateral and vertical network movements, and ultimately compromise the exam domain controller. 3. Provide a detailed, professionally written report. And 4. Perform a live 15-minute report debrief in front of our assessors, comprised of all senior penetration testers. So that's the description of the exam. That's what you can expect, and I think it does a good job of hitting the nail on the head. All of these things that it says you must do to pass the exam, I did to pass the exam. Next, I want to talk about how long the exam took me. So, as I mentioned before, I took 2 attempts for the PNPT. I failed the first one and passed on my second attempt, which does take a little bit of credit away from me, but I think honesty is the best policy in these cases, and I think it was a great learning experience, so I want to talk about it. On the first attempt, of course, I used all 5 days, and it's important to note that I did not spend 100+ hours straight on this exam. I was not going at it for 5 days straight. I went out to lunch with some friends and family. I went to dinner. I made some food for myself. I took very frequent breaks during this 5-day period. you want to treat it like anything else. You're not going to treat a real penetration test doing it 12 hours straight. Right? You want to take breaks. You want to treat it like you would any other job or any other function. You take breaks during the workday, as you should with the exam. Don't stress yourself. Do your best that you can and take breaks if you feel a little overwhelmed. If you find yourself in my situation where you go all 5 days throughout your exam and you do not pass, you do not compromise the domain controller, it's very important that you still write your report. So I took very detailed notes throughout the entire exam, as you should as well. Take detailed notes so at the end of that 5 day testing period, you can write a super detailed report. Even so, my report on day after the first attempt was 40 or 50 pages because I still found a lot of things. While I didn't compromise the domain controller, there's still a ton of findings that the client needed to know about. It's important to treat it like a real pen test, even if you don't get domain admin on your first attempt. Okay? You have 2 attempts for a reason. If the first attempt doesn't go your way, still give your all for the report, because the more effort you put into the report, the better the hint is that you're going to get, and the higher the chances you are that you're going to succeed on attempt number 2. So that is the big recommendation for during the exam period. 1, take breaks, treat it like a normal job. You're not going to go 8 hours or 12 hours straight without eating, without drinking, without taking a break. That's going to kill you. Take breaks, go out, spend some time, do some fun things, and then come back to the exam later if you ever feel stressed or stuck. Next, take really good notes during the exam. Note down everything you see. Make sure you're noting down findings, IP addresses, usernames, passwords, everything that you think is important. You should write it down so you can use it in your report later. And the third thing is write a good report. Even if you quote unquote fail the exam, you're still doing a penetration test. You still have to report to a client. Make sure that that client gets the best report possible, regardless of if you compromise the domain controller or not. Now let's talk about after the exam. So I passed on attempt 2, and now the exam portion is done. Let's talk about the reporting portion. So my report ended up being 50 pages long, and this is subjective. You can use a completely different template than me and have a 25-page report. And the length doesn't really matter. It's more so if you present the findings in a professional manner. To pass the exam, you need to create a professionally written report. And the template that I used is the one that Heath recommended. So I'll provide a link in the description and also pop a screenshot up on the screen of what that looks like. But it's pretty much just TCM Security sample report. And if you have Microsoft Word, you can edit this perfectly fine, and you pretty much just plug and chug information. Make sure you're just following Heath's guide and TCM's guide on what should be in there. So that is the finding, the remediation, the evidence. So you need a screenshot of your finding and any supporting documentation. So like if there's a NIST article regarding password complexity or something like that, just make sure you attach it in there for the client to see. Now, let's talk about the live debrief. And this can be a little intimidating for people, especially if you're not comfortable with public speaking, because as I mentioned earlier, the exact description of what the live debrief is perform a live 15-minute debrief in front of our assessors comprised of all senior penetration testers. And I kind of called gap on this because it kind of is. I did not do a debrief. My debrief was not in front of a panel of security senior penetration testers. That's not who I presented in front of. I had one assessor, and I do not think he was a senior penetration tester. Now, I could be wrong, but that was just my analysis. It was one person, and they essentially said, "Hey, you ready to go?" I'm like, "Yep." I shared my screen, and I used my report that I already written to do the debrief. And in the report, at least the TCM template, there is a finding that is the steps to domain admin. And that is the finding that I used, or at least where in the report I went to do this debrief. And it's exactly what it sounds like. I listed out step by step. Hey, this is where I started. I had no information. And then I performed OSINT. I found this. I found this. I moved to here. I found this. I found this. I found this. Blah, blah, blah. And I eventually got to domain admin. And these are the steps that you're going to want to cover in your live debrief. It's important to note that each step should have an attached remediation, and you should talk about that remediation during your live debrief. So let's say, hey, I used OSINT and I found that this person's social media page leaked their password and I was able to get into the internal network that way. The remediation to that would be, well, train your employees to, one, not leak a password on social media, and practice better OPSEC. That could be the remediation there. And obviously, that is just an example. You're going to have to apply that to whatever you find during the exam. The third thing I recommend is to practice. It may feel silly reading over a report and speaking it out loud, but trust me, it really helps. Practice, 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 and make sure you use a timer as well. You have a 15-minute limit for this debrief, which sounds like a lot of time, but for all the findings you need to cover, it goes by super quickly. So make sure you use a timer, make sure you don't go over 15 minutes, make sure you keep it short, simple, and sweet. But that is it. That is how you can pass the PNPT in 2025, starting from your prep, doing those Hack the Box labs, doing the Try Hack Me labs, of course, doing all the courses, to during the exam, what you should look for, how you should feel, what your mindset should be, and then after the exam, how can you practice your report, what should your report look like, and all that good stuff. So thank you for tuning into this video. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you feel that much more prepared for your PNPT. Let me know down in the comments below if you've taken the PNPT, how's it gone? And if you're going to take the PNPT, how you're feeling. Are you excited? Are you nervous? Let me know down below.